Hello everyone, my name is Brooke and I have prepared this video for you to learn a little bit more about this process of global reassessment of seagrass and to share with you the work that we're doing in the Seagrass Specialist Group. I am serving as the Red List Authority, or the RLA, for this Seagrass Specialist Group under Fred Short, Dr. Fred Short, Professor Emeritus Fred Short. And we've put together a new framework for assessing global seagrass extinction risk through the development of this bioregional leadership team. So I want to go through what the bioregional leadership team is and then demonstrate how the reassessment process can go and some of the resources that are available to you. Thank you all for being here. I want to acknowledge the land that I'm on and the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We have a responsibility to acknowledge our Indigenous connections, as well as the histories of dispossession and forced removal that have allowed for the growth and survival of this institution, which is the University of Washington, and also where I live in my home. What are we here to talk about? Really what we're talking about is trying to get a grasp for what is going on in seagrass communities at a global scale. And to do this, we really need to focus in on some very specific information. And IUCN has developed a model for us to take some of the expertise, a lot of the research and experiences of the communities that work with these species to understand what true risks and threats of extinction are. So we kind of come up with these ideas that where we're working maybe in the region, if there are some issues with seagrass there, then we might talk to another group that's having some similar issues. And what the IUCN model really allows us to do is pull all of that expertise, all of that knowledge, and try to get a snapshot of what's going on in our specialist group. So who are we? The Red List, I'm sure you've heard of it, administered by the IUCN through the Global Species Program. And the Global Species Program has 6 commissions working towards this goal of conservation biology. So one of the commissions is the Species Survival Commission, and the Seagrass Species Specialist Group is part of that commission. And the chair of our group is Professor Emeritus Fred Short. I've been serving as the Red List Authority, and we've developed this bioregional leadership team now consisting of bioregions of seagrass, which have been established, including the temperate North Atlantic, tropical Atlantic, Mediterranean, temperate North Pacific, the tropical Indo-Pacific, and temperate Southern Oceans. And then our team also includes a GIS coordinator. Overall, the IUCN Seagrass Group has around 150 members at any given time, and a lot of the work that we've been doing has been sponsored by and supported through the International Seagrass Biology Workshop, which wasn't able to meet this year. So I prepared this video also to hopefully provide a little bit of information in research gap here. We can still get some of this work done, this important work. So thank you so much for everybody who's here, either as a member or serving on the leadership team. Hopefully what I'm presenting will provide you with enough detail for us to move forward. So this is your bioregional leadership team. If you're not on the team, we have Carmen, Brooke, Demetrius, Alyssa, Masa, Siti, and Beth is helping us pull all this information together. And then of course our chair here in the corner who was missing from our call, but we put in a hopefully flattering picture of him. And so this team of 9 is working all together to try to take this temperature of the seagrass for 2020. And our goal by the end of this year is to have looked over and evaluated all of the seagrass species once again for their threat status. So this is a big undertaking, but we really have been focused on how we can develop this network in a way that makes this undertaking something that's really inclusive and positive experience, because the Species Survival Commission has this really important role to play in getting together over these issues of biodiversity and sustainable use of our animals and plants. And I think it's really important that we start to make this accessible to as many people as possible. I think the way that we're going to get to global conservation is through global effort, and the collaboration of international scientists in this way is really powerful. So again, I want to thank you so much for being here. You are helping us to collect data, important data, and put that to use and share that data out with the world. So hopefully, as we move along here, you'll see how we're starting through this group. We help meet this larger goal of the Commission, which is providing knowledge on the status and trends of these species and undertaking an analysis of threats. So again, even at the regional work, develop policies and guidelines, facilitate conservation planning, and catalyze action on the ground and in the water to help our species survive what are ongoing and escalating threats ecologically around the world. And then hopefully this overarching goal, I think, really of providing advice on how we start to reconcile biodiversity conservation with economic development and societal change, which is a piece that I work on at the university with my students in design, in ecological design. And so I know how important this work is and how much this feeds into design and planning professions. So it just reinforces for me how important this work is. So thanks again for being here. We've taken this mandate from the Species Survival Commission and set up this seagrass species specialist group. Not me, but seagrass biologists, and our chair, Fred Short, has been the initiator of this. And I've joined this group in 2016 and just been really grateful to continue this mission. And in doing that work over the last 4 years with Fred, coming to this realization that we could expand this team in a meaningful way and that we would find people who would want to help us develop and maintain this list. So our goals here will be to promote that larger mission for the Commission and through an assessment of our seagrass species and keeping those up to date. So this bioregional leadership team is composed of 9 members. That's the seagrass chair, which is Fred, the Red List Authority, who is currently me, and 6 bioregional leaders and our GIS lead, as I mentioned. And the goals for each bioregional leader will be to host bioregional meetings, attend quarterly meetings with this leadership team, and then participate in the data collection and sharing and synthesis process with your teammates. And then ultimately we're drafting these assessments for review, and we'll author some publications. So the mission of the bioregional leadership team at the top here is to advance the completion of the quadrennial seagrass species reassessments through excellence in organizing, collecting, and sharing data on global seagrass species identification, population trends, and community extents. So it is a mouthful, it is a lot to do, and that's why it takes a team. And so this is how we've split it up based on bioregional groups that were established by this beautiful team. And what we want to do really in this is start to branch out and let each group around the world figure out how to organize and identify within themselves the priorities for conservation, so that this isn't such a top-down effort as much as it is like a grassroots coming together and collaboration. So we're working really hard to allow the bioregional groups to form their own structure and work together in ways that are meaningful. For instance, Region 5 has split up into potentially 3 different kind of sub-regional groups, and that's working really well for them in starting this reassessment process. Like Region 1 has a lot of species that overlap with other groups, so that region has taken on some multi-regional assessment. So anyways, been really excited and really proud of where our leadership team has gone, and we're really excited to have members like you join us and help with this reassessment process. The bioregional leaders, again, preparing these official IUCN reports, get to make an impact on the global seagrass conservation reporting and collaborate with other seagrass conservationists who feel the same way you do while developing some leadership skills. So we have bioregional leaders and bioregional members, and altogether that allows us to really cast the widest net and get the most accurate reporting of data, which is our primary goal. So this year we had a timeline that we were after as a leadership team, and we're now in a really exciting phase, which is the data collection, sharing, and synthesis phase. So right now, the teams have formed, and we're looking for people who are experts in these different seagrasses to make sure and get their input on what kind of data we're sharing at this global level. So the bioregional leaders are set up to incorporate and work together and collaborate with species that are endemic in their region. If you want to get involved and haven't, I would suggest first reaching out to that bioregional leader and letting them know that you're interested and tell them which species you've been working on. And then the draft assessments have begun and will be finished up hopefully by October. Fred and I are going to be the primary reviewers for those, along with Beth Polidoro probably. And then we'll eventually get those publications submitted. And we have decided this is a tight timeline. If you still want to get involved, but you can't do it this year, let us know and get involved for the next quadrennial, which will be 2021 to 2024, where we'll look at answering. We'll set an agenda in January, but we'll look at answering some of the questions that we haven't been able to do as we really narrowed our focus for the last 6 months on this reassessment. So I'm going to take you through these different actions that are needed through this assessment. And basically these are kind of 5 steps where we're collecting this new data. We're going to update the forms that we have. We're going to do an assessment of the status again for each species. We'll submit those drafts, and then we'll report back to the group and set this agenda for January. I just wanted to really quickly clarify how we develop taxonomy. Obviously, speciation, when we're talking about conserving species, the way that we identify and nominate species is really important. So we have established a process for determining whether a species will be accepted onto the list or whether it does or should be removed from the list. Also, if one, it must have a complete and published taxonomic description, and then secondly, there needs to be a documented unique sexual reproductive characteristic or genetic difference for a new species. And then taxonomic reviews and also new species are assessed during the bioregional leadership team meetings at least annually. So it is important to submit your thoughts and concerns on those to the team, and we'll be sure to get those on the agenda. One of the important things when doing these reassessments is to just sort of accept uncertainty. And it's one of the things we have a hard time doing as scientists because we're so used to really quantifying and analyzing and looking for bias and trying not to publish just sort of opinions. But in this case, we know we want, as much as possible, we want peer-reviewed literature and empirical data, but we also believe and trust in the expert opinion to help us get a fair assessment of what which species are really at risk of extinction, excuse me. So I just put together this little slide so that you can understand that uncertainty we have to accept it, and it's important that we represent it when we feel uncertain, or we can provide a range of data. We can, document that uncertainty, but it is important to put forward what we think is the most plausible condition. And that will lead to us understanding more about its status. So again, we'll always, anything that isn't sort of empirical, we want to, validate that and represent where we may have error or what might be kind of a range that we're working in. So all types of data are acceptable, and the more that we have, the idea is that the better resolution that we will get overall. So we're trying to reduce data deficiencies in seagrass. When we're looking at data quality, we can look at and gain this data from a number of sources. This can involve looking at the published literature, like I said, but there may also be contacting experts, might be looking at data sets yourself It may be looking at remote sensing data or any other kind of habitat and ecology mapping that's been done. And then it may be that we are able to at some point fund research focused on answering some of these questions where we just don't have enough data, or the data is there and it hasn't been analyzed, and hopefully be a little bit more proactive about gathering data as well. So those are some of the ways some of the data that might be acceptable. Now I just want to introduce you to what some of these categories are. So you've got your species, and now you kind of have an idea of what data you need or want, and then you're kind of looking at how do I get to understand what the status is. There is a training available, which I would highly recommend, but also we are here to support and guide you through the process of actually looking at this flowchart of assessment. But basically, there are a number of different categories here, and the threatened categories are these three in the middle with the dashed box around them. So of course, if something is extinct or extinct in the wild, there isn't a whole lot that we can do to prevent that or gather any more data. So that's why those are sort of out of the threatened category. They sort of supersede the threat. It's done. There's also a newer category now called the regionally extinct, and we could explore that later. But what we really want to focus on here with this reassessment process is seagrasses that we knew before, or that in previous assessments were vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. So these three categories are categories where the risk of extinction is the greatest, and potentially we could have an important role to play in keeping them from going extinct. The other two that are so a near threatened status and then least concerned status are not our top priority right now, but there are also species that we often do a lot of research on. For instance, a lot of the species that are of least concern are a lot more common. So they're still important seagrass. It doesn't mean that they're not important. It's just that the risk of them going extinct is really low. So we're going to try to reduce the resources that we put towards those and really think more about what we can, if there's things that we can do for seagrass species that are threatened. Okay, then we have at the very bottom there, the sort of data deficient and not evaluated. So data deficient in seagrass, we have several species like this where we have the species name, but we didn't have a lot of data on the extent of their occurrence or how big the populations were. And so we really want to make sure, that's another, so along with the three threatened categories, we've added data deficient as a category we want to maintain, try to get more data on so that we can move out of this data deficiency and get it into some kind of category. So even if we can just kind of give it a best guess, if you can move a species from data deficient to least concern or near threatened, or realize that it actually probably is vulnerable, those are big moves that can make a big difference. And then we don't have any seagrasses that have never been evaluated, so that doesn't really applicable. Okay. So there are 5 categories. I'm going to go through them in a little bit of detail. If you need to take a pause, I know this is a lot of data and information. This might be a good place to take a rest. But when you start up again, join me for looking at these 5 criteria. The criteria that we're mostly looking at for seagrasses are criteria A and B. And then it may be that we also see some opportunity to grow where some of this quantitative analyses and projections and modeling may be leading us into a place where we can utilize that category in the future as well. So here we go. I'm just going to go through these a little bit. So I talked a little bit about this prioritization. I just wanted to reiterate that species that are possibly extinct, which is a tag that you can attach to critically endangered, and then critically endangered and endangered are going to be, and vulnerable are going to be the priority. I'm so sorry, I'm trying to read and do all this stuff. Okay, so our priorities here will be ones like I showed you that are in that threatened category, and if we can move data deficient species up out of a data deficiency into some category, we'll be making some really important progress. So, oops, excuse me. So the first criteria that IUCN uses to evaluate risk of extinction is a population size reduction. So these are reductions that occur over either 10 years or 3 generations. So in our case, it's usually the 10 years. So over 10 years, have we lost 90% of the population, 70% of the population? This is how we get into these vulnerable categories, or threatened categories, excuse me. And then there's some criteria here. How do we determine that? So if you've seen a 90% reduction, then you know that you have, then yes, this species is critically endangered. So you can put CR, critically, and then A1, or if it meets the qualifications down here, it has to meet all 3 of A2, A3, and A4. So if it's critically endangered, it'll have lost 80% of the population, for instance. Okay, so that's a drastic reduction in population size, which would be a signal that it was collapsing. So a population, according to IUCN, this is going to be the total number of individuals in all the areas of that species distribution. And this differs from the population size because the population size is monitored by the number of mature individuals or reproducing individuals. Okay, so if you're still with me, there's the population, which is every individual in all of the areas. The population size is just the number of mature or flowering, or so you don't count any seedlings. And then the subpopulation could be potentially a distinct geographic region or a place where there's no genetic exchange. And I'm going to show you an example of that at the end. And then the generation length, this is the average age of parents or turnover rate of these breeding individuals. So it's kind of how long does it take to develop and then turn into a plant and then actually reproduce. So in a lot of cases, our seagrasses, I think, have a 3-year generation length, for instance. And it looks like I didn't fill in what age is. So I guess I'll have to get back to you on that one. It's an oversight, excuse me. Criteria B then is the second way, second qualifier for a risk category. And this will be if the geographic range has changed dramatically or, is restricted. So for instance, if you have a really rare seagrass that's only found in one inlet in the world, and that inlet is less than 100 kilometers squared, then you have a critically endangered seagrass species based on the extent of occurrence, and then based on the occupancy of occurrence of 10 kilometers squared. If it's less than that, then we know we're really in trouble with seagrass. Now remember, these categories are set up based on looking at all species of the world. And so there may be times when you're looking at this and thinking, well, I don't really know how to apply this to seagrass. In those cases, feel free to reach out to me because I know sometimes we think, wow, anything under 20,000 kilometers is probably really small for a seagrass around the world. So that would be that, but in this case, it only really is a vulnerable status. So if you feel like after using these criteria, yes, some things qualify, or you can't understand why they don't, feel free to reach out for me as well. So in this case, I just wanted to make sure and define the extent of occurrence. This is kind of the polygon, which is where in the world all the populations are. You sort of set up an exterior polygon. So if you think of Zostra marina, for instance, all across North America, there's a really huge polygon. It's probably the hugest extent of occurrence, right, in seagrass. That would go all around the world. So Zostra marina is not going to qualify here as in any kind of way for the extent of occurrence is so big. The area of occupancy is different than that sort of line that connects all of the populations. The area of occupancy really is about how many like total coverage. So that's the actual area of coverage altogether that has seagrass in it. So it's not this simplified polygon of range. So in this case, for instance, if you had a population in Southern Australia and you had a population off the coast of Chile, the extent of occurrence would be right Australia all the way to Chile. That's quite large. But if you actually look at how much area is occupied by those species, it's actually quite small. So these two measures allow us to look at the spatial extent and fragmentation of seagrass beds and kind of separate what type of threats there are. What is the risk? Where is the risk in those threats? If that makes sense. Sorry for the stumble. Okay, so yeah, so if we know that a seagrass only is found in 5 different places in the entire world, then it automatically qualifies as endangered if it has less than 500 square kilometers of area. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about that. All right, occurrence and range. So that's kind of what I was talking about. All right, so we've got kind of the population and then the range. Those are the two kind of things we're looking at. Criterion C is about small population sizes and declines. And we just aren't going to get this small of a population of seagrass. I mean, it's possible, so I'm sharing it with you, but this isn't really one that you need to spend a lot of time understanding probably. If you think your species may qualify as this and you think there might be less than 10,000 individuals left in the entire population, mature population, let's talk. Same thing with D, we're talking about very small population sizes. So we don't probably need to think about that one. I haven't seen a lot of evidence for this quantitative analysis criteria being used with seagrass. And I think it'd be really interesting. I mean, I haven't even seen it with plants in general. So this is something that I know would be of interest probably when we're looking at now these kind of climate change models over a 100-year period. I could see that this one might be one where we could see some growth. And I'd like to know if you guys have some ideas for any models that might be doing this now. Actually, I think this would be one to really play out a little bit more. I didn't have any examples. So as we talk about threatening processes towards seagrasses, we all know what those are. There are so many. We just want to make sure and document all of those in the updated data sheets and provide citations and any kind of data understanding why certain populations might be going up or down, and any new information that's been learned about your species and its resilience. So this is the last piece of the assessment. Thank you so much for sticking with it. If you need to take one more break here. Right now, I am going to just demonstrate to you a little bit if I can. This is where it might get a little clunky because I haven't used Panopto with Zoom before. But I'm going to try to share with you how kind of my mind and how I've gone about starting this Heterosostra nigricollis reassessment, just to demonstrate to you what the process might be, and this might help inspire you. So hopefully you're leaving this feeling like you have a little bit of understanding now about what the IUCN is, what the seagrass group is, what the actual red list process is and these criteria are, and now how do I apply those onto my species. So I'm going to just try to demonstrate this. Basically, there's a little bit of a checklist, right? The process is to collect data on your species, then update the red list form that we have, update the map if needed, a range map, and then go through those criteria and reassess this red list status. Once you've done that and you've got that draft all complete, you can send that to Fred and I, or if you are not a bioregional leader but you're working on a bioregional team, you can give that to your bioregional leader, and then that leader can review it and send it up the chain here to us. So I hope that reduces some of the anxiety around feeling like you have to do it perfect. There will be other eyes on it, and really, it's really helpful for us, mostly for someone to collect that data and write up that text. So it gives us an opportunity all to contribute and to be authors on reassessing the seagrass for 2020, which is just such an important task for us. And then in the end, it's really great. We all get back together and pat each other on the back and talk about what the future holds for some of these species and where some of our largest concerns are for conservation priority at the global scale. Okay, so here's where it might get tricky. I'm going to try to share with you. Okay, hopefully this still works. I think it's gonna. Okay. Hopefully you can still see this. Not sure if the Panopto will catch this or not. So that's why I did also do have the Zoom. What I want to do, hopefully, I can test if Panopto can see this. Display, so it doesn't tell me what it's capturing. Okay, there I am. All right, sorry for that, and hopefully I'll get smoother with this as time goes on, but this is a species that I've been looking at, Zostera nigricollis, or more accurately now, we're going to change this to Heterozostera nigricollis. And a lot of the research that has been done on this species has only occurred more recently, so I'm really excited to update this. So the first step in this process of reassessment for me was just to go to the red list. That's the whole intent of this red list, is that it's accessible to the public. You can download all of the data, or the bioregional leader in your group can or should give you the draft form. We have online Google Docs for each one of these so that we can keep all the information together and keep it updated. So anyways, you'll have your form, but take your species name, go in here, and you can look this up, and there might be some photos. You'll have the citation, which shortly may have your name in it. You will then, have a look at the status. Here's the map of the total extent of where this species can be found. It describes all kinds of different conservation issues. And soon we're going to have a lot more on what we're calling the green list, or like if you have a species that's recovering and actually doing well, we don't want to forget about that either. So it looks like I might lose my power. Just a second. Sorry for that break. Okay, so anyways, this is a really exciting piece here where everything is really accessible to everyone in the world. And this helps us, which is one of the goals for this group then, is to really share this information and make sure that we're coordinating all of our efforts at a global level for conservation. So here's where you will see a lot of this published. One of the really great pieces here that I like to look at is just this text summary. And read through that and see if it's up to date for your species, if there are new results and information that are missing there that kind of come to your mind right away. But the next thing you can do is also go to Web of Science. Oh, I wanted to point out one thing on here also, the date of assessment. So you can see that it's been over 13 years since this species has been assessed. And when I went to the Web of Science, I decided to put in Zostera nigricollis because that's the synonym now with Heterozostera nigricollis. So if you go to the Web of Science and you search all the databases with a basic search, you can put your species name in and then add the OR modifier and then any synonyms, and then you can search. And I like to search all the time spans. Oh, shoot, it's gonna make me sign in again. No, okay. Yes, it is, okay. Great, well, you can see from the beginning. So I'll just go to all databases and I will type the species name. And I will add or the other species name. If this doesn't apply to you, you may only have one species name, but some of these species have been named and renamed, and especially in Zostera lately. Okay, so I have all the years and the time span, and I press search. Sorry if this is a repeat for some of you. I know some of you are familiar with this, but for those who aren't, this is a really great way then to evaluate what has come up since. So basically I've got these by date. So the latest research that involved Heterozostera or Zostera nigricollis comes up, and they're ordered, like I said, by date. So I can go back now and say, okay, 2007 was the last time this was assessed. So I might go back to like 2006, and you can see I'm still at 2017. So then I might get really excited and think, what's going on? Everything's so new. And in Web of Science, oops, I did that fast. In the Web of Science, you get to the top one, it'll kind of tell you these research areas. But if you go to publication years, you can then look at different publications on your species over time. And in this case, you can see, oops, I'll change the number of results to, I can show them all. Yes. You can show all of them. And then anyways, you can see now, and you can download these. You know, there was one so far this year, we've had one publication, 2 last year. There were 6 publications with Heterosauster nigricollis in 2018. Yeah, that was a big jump. And then 3, you know, for instance. So you can kind of see how this goes, but really nothing before 2005. It's the first time we really see this species described by John Keogh. So anyway, so a lot of my point is that a lot of the research that has happened on the species has happened since this last reassessment. So it's important work that that we do that. I just wanted to show you, for those of you who are on the bioregional leadership team, you will be able to get in here and get these and give them to any members, or otherwise that you, oops. No assessments are completed. That's okay. We just started, but so my species is in Region 6, and I'm working in this Region 6 group, so I have access. If you don't have access, again, you can talk to your bioregional leader, and they can give you this sheet. So go in here to the nigricollis, and you'll see I've modified it with 2020. There's a file with the original data sheet in it, and now I've modified that original data sheet. So I made a copy, and then if I open it with the Google Doc, hopefully the changes will show up here, and you can see that what I've been doing and sharing in here. Let's see if I can. So over here, if you can see, you can change it to suggesting instead of editing. And if it's in suggesting mode, it leaves the edits in there, which is really helpful for reviewing. Okay, so everything that's green you can see has kind of been updated by me. There's a few things to update, and I've gone through here, like the elevation changed. So that looks like there might be some audio issues, hopefully not. Anyways, these are the different categories that you'll be looking at. And some of these may not make sense, like, does it lay eggs? Okay, well, you have to understand IUCN is also doing animals, so don't worry. If it doesn't relate, you know, just say no, it's no big deal. And then you can see I've started to come in here now and work out some of this text and narration. I wanted to point out this bibliography. This is where, so when you're in this Web of Science search and you see all of these publications, you can actually you know, look at them, read them if you haven't read them yet or hadn't seen them, and just pull out any that are informing the conservation status, and make sure that you put those into the Google Doc down here so that they're accessible. Yeah, just like any publication, you know, you want to make sure and add anything that backs up the results that you have. And again, if you don't have empirical data, but you have knowledge as an expert, put that in there and just make sure you just cite it as a personal communication, and be clear about any limitations to that, because this will be updated again, hopefully within the next, you know, in 4 years, and we'll be able to catch up anything that's come up since then or that wasn't accurate at that time. So I guess that is about it. I was also going to show you some kind of interesting problems. We figured out Zostera chilensis is the same species as Nigricollis. It's not flowering, and so the question of, is this a geographically isolated population, or is this even a population because it's not flowering? Those are kind of questions that we're talking about. This one was assessed in 2008. There you go. So still a while ago. There's been a lot of new information. This picture of Tasmanica is actually Nigricollis. So that's a problem. And we'll get that updated. And, finding stuff like that, it's really important because this is like at a global level, somebody's going to look up what is Zoster tasmanica, and they're going to see this picture of Zoster nigricollis. And so we need to be sure that we're all talking about the same species if we're going to, it's like one of the basic principles with conservation. So while this seems really simple, there's really just a few data entries that are needed. And then of course the kind of narration, but getting this right really matters at the global level. Okay, and then polyclamus, we don't even have a picture of. And there's some new research on that as well. But look, you can see this is the only place in the world that this grows. It's a small area. So we need to know how dense is it in this area? Is this extent a fair representation? Like, is this probably how much seagrass we have? Or is it, actually there's just a couple of patches along here, and this is a really important, like a species that could be vulnerable here in the Southern Oceans, which are changing really rapidly with climate change. So these are the kind of questions that we are grappling with. And here, I'll just make sure that I said everything. I'll pull this up. I know we're getting at about an hour here. Sorry, this was so long. Just put this back up. And we talked a little bit about this, this idea that then I'm looking at the Heterozostra, and now this is the same species, or is it? So I have to come up with some resolution in this kind of stuff, or at least some direction, or at least acknowledgement of the lack of data and where this problem, really defining the problems is also part of conservation for us, right? So I guess that was it. Okay. I always love to hear your kudos, questions, and concerns. And I can be reached, the IUCN Seagrass group, RLA, can be reached at iucnseagrass@gmail.com. And we're also on Twitter at iSeagrass. And we're just really happy to have you along for your interest in conservation. And hopefully this video hasn't scared you away and you still want to help us out. So if you are a member or a seagrass enthusiast and you want to find your bioregional leader, you can contact me or look them up. And then also you can help with these assessments by simply kind of gathering this data, gathering photographs, and sharing with us some of the conservation and restoration successes that you've had. So all of your information, all of your expertise matters. We'd love your help, and hopefully this video helped kind of demystify the process in the group and has inspired you to help us look at seagrass conservation at the global level. Thank you so much, and look forward to hearing from you. I will see if I can figure out how to turn this off.